into a story that is making headlines around the world. An unprecedented, albeit controversial, new discovery is shedding light on a mystery that dates back millennia.
Everyone thought Giza had given up all its secrets, but a few weeks ago, a routine LIDAR scan, the kind meant to double-check what experts already knew, picked up something that immediately raised alarms. Beneath the sand, where nothing should exist, appeared a massive shape, too symmetrical to be natural, too perfectly aligned to be ignored. As researchers dug into the data, the mood shifted fast. This wasn't just an odd reading or a glitch in the scan. The dimensions were deliberate. The placement mirrored the most famous monument on Earth. And suddenly, a question no one wanted to ask was back on the table. Instead of excitement, there was silence. Access to the findings tightened. Discussions moved behind closed doors, because if this structure is real, it means the Great Sphinx was never meant to stand alone. And if something this enormous could stay hidden for thousands of years, what else might still be buried beneath the story we've been told? Before we go any further, hit like and subscribe, because what's buried next isn't something everyone wants uncovered. The second Sphinx mystery, the Great Sphinx of Giza, is impossible to ignore. Carved from a single block of limestone bedrock, it stretches about 240 feet long, stands 66 feet tall, and weighs an estimated 20,000 tons. With the body of a lion and the head of a man, it has stared east toward the rising sun for thousands of years. Yet here's the strange part. No ancient inscription anywhere on the monument tells us who built it or why. Modern Egyptology officially credits the Sphinx to Pharaoh Khafra, claiming the face resembles him and that it was carved around 2500 BCE. But that explanation raises problems. There is no dedicatory text, no construction record, no clear reference in ancient Egyptian writings. Even the Sphinx's placement, partially hidden below ground level, suggests it may have been buried for long periods, as if it belonged to an earlier age. For decades, scholars assumed the mystery ended there. One Sphinx, one guardian, a unique monument. But that assumption is now being challenged. Recent ground-penetrating radar, seismic surveys, and subsurface scans around the Giza Plateau have detected large symmetrical anomalies beneath the sand, shapes that don't look natural. At the same time, obscure ancient references describe paired guardians watching sacred sites, not solitary ones. That raises an unsettling question. What if the Great Sphinx was never meant to stand alone? What if it once had a counterpart, perfectly aligned, deliberately hidden, and buried deep beneath the plateau? If a second Sphinx exists, it wouldn't just be another statue. It would challenge timelines, rewrite construction theories, and force historians to admit that something about Giza has been missing all along. And the most disturbing part? The evidence pointing to this possibility comes from two places that rarely agree: ancient tradition and modern technology. History of the two Sphinxes. The idea that the Sphinx might not be alone has been around far longer than most people realize. When you look through ancient records, you begin to notice details that were once ignored. One of the clearest examples came from the dream stele, which was created more than 3,400 years ago by Pharaoh Thutmose IV, and showed two great guardian figures facing away from each other. Scholars have debated the scene for decades, unsure if it was symbolic or if it hinted at something physical that once stood on the Giza Plateau. To this day, the image raises a quiet question about whether the desert once held a pair of monumental guardians instead of one. Historical accounts from later periods occasionally mentioned paired guardians at Giza. So it is 4,600 years old, but the stone behind me was inscribed by another pharaoh from the New Kingdom, and that is almost 1,000 years after the Sphinx itself. Though these references were often dismissed as symbolic rather than literal descriptions, interest in the subject grew again in the 1990s when Dr. Zahi Hawass discussed the possibility of unknown structures beneath the surface. His comments came shortly after teams carried out geophysical scans using radar systems capable of reading subtle shifts underground. The scans picked up unusual shapes beneath the ground close to the known Sphinx. They were not natural formations. The shapes appeared too straight and too deliberate, hinting at rooms or carved structures that had been buried for thousands of years. Those results encouraged more research in the early 2000s. Teams returned with better equipment and found even more anomalies beneath the rising dunes. Some patterns looked like walls, others suggested narrow passages hidden beneath layers of compacted sand. Specialists studying the images believed that something large may rest deeper than anyone expected, possibly another guardian built during a forgotten phase of Egyptian history. If such a figure exists, its age could reshape everything we understand about early Egypt. As mentioned before, there are ongoing debates about the known Sphinx and when it was created. If the first Sphinx is older than official timelines, then the second buried guardian might come from an even earlier age, when ancient builders tried to keep their structures safe from shifting sand or rising floods along the Nile. It is also possible that political conflicts led some groups to hide or cover monuments that no longer fit their beliefs. Ancient myths also added to the mystery. There was an account that spoke of part of the Sphinx being damaged by lightning. One scholar suggested that this tale may not have been describing the known Sphinx at all. Instead, it may have described a lost twin that suffered destruction after being marked by a powerful curse connected to the highest deity of Egypt. The myth was once treated as nothing more than a symbolic tale. Yet the new discoveries have forced researchers to look at it with new interest. Each new survey and every old record placed beside it makes the silence beneath the desert feel heavier. Something may be waiting beneath those sands. And the closer researchers look, the more unsettling the mystery becomes. By seeing the Sphinx in profile and the Pyramid of Khufu behind, you have a sense of a two-dimensional rendering, which was very important to the ancient Egyptians. The claim and the denial. The debate around Giza was already intense, but the moment the idea of a second Sphinx surfaced, everything changed. This wasn't just another theory. It was the kind of claim that threatens careers, reputations, and decades of accepted history. Because if a second statue, anywhere near the size of the Great Sphinx, really lies buried beneath the sands, then the story of Egypt's Old Kingdom doesn't just need updating, it needs rethinking from the ground up. The controversy exploded after a surprising statement from Ra Abdel Halim, a senior official in Egypt's tourism sector. Speaking to local media, he revealed that a statue close in size to the famous Sphinx had been discovered near the Giza Pyramid complex. His words spread fast, not because they were dramatic, but because they came from someone inside the system, someone working daily at one of the most closely monitored archaeological sites on Earth. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Prominent archaeologists pushed back hard, dismissing the claim outright. Some accused Halim of exaggeration, suggesting he was chasing headlines rather than facts. Then came the strongest denial of all. Zahi Hawass, former Minister of Antiquities and the man who oversaw Giza for nearly 20 years, publicly shut the idea down. According to Hawass, there is only one Sphinx. Any talk of another is fiction, designed to stir confusion and distract from serious archaeological work. But Halim refused to retreat. As the public relations director for the entire Giza Pyramids district, he stood by his statement. He pointed to the missing inscriptions on the original Sphinx and argued that long-ignored evidence suggests something more is hidden beneath the plateau. In his view, the clues have been there all along, just never taken seriously. That refusal to back down changed everything. Because now the question wasn't just about archaeology, it was about trust. Either a high-ranking official was telling the truth, or Egypt's most powerful institutions were openly contradicting one another. And if Halim is right, the consequences are enormous. A second Sphinx would suggest that the Old Kingdom may be far older or far more advanced than current records admit. It would force scientists to reconsider how early Egyptians built on such a scale, and whether the timelines taught in schools and museums are simply too late. In other words, the sand beneath Giza may be hiding more than stone. It may be hiding a history we're not ready to face. Evidence from Luxor. The desert sun beat down on a modern construction site in Luxor, where workers were focused on upgrading a major road. Their machinery scraped and dug, carving a path through history itself. Then the blades hit something that was not sand or modern rubble. The noise changed. What emerged from the earth in 2018 was not a simple stone, but the contours of a massive statue which had been buried for millennia between the two legendary temple complexes of Karnak and Luxor. This accidental find sent a shockwave through the archaeological community. Officials confirmed the discovery, but with a heavy air of caution. The location alone was staggering, a mere 6 miles from the sacred royal burial ground of the Valley of the Kings. The potential age of the statue is what truly bends the mind. Experts believe the statue dates to Egypt's Old Kingdom period, making it potentially contemporary with the Giza monuments. That is 4,000 years of silence spent hidden beneath the soil. Imagine a monument that old, contemporary with the pyramids, suddenly found not in a remote desert, but under a busy city street. The authorities made a strange and telling decision. They did not immediately excavate the figure. No photographs were released to the public, and it created a vacuum of information filled with speculation. The statue would remain trapped in the earth for the foreseeable future, with officials explaining it had to stay embedded due to the delicate nature of its environment. This extreme caution reveals their belief in the find's significance. Archaeologists moved slowly, determined to preserve whatever this is without any reckless action. Their careful approach suggests they are dealing with something incredibly fragile and important. While its full form remains partially hidden, the descriptions are unmistakable. It is said to possess the body of a lion and the head of a human. That combination is not a coincidence. It mirrors the exact iconic form of the Great Sphinx at Giza, meaning this colossal figure could only have been created by the command of someone with immense, likely royal, authority from the deepest layers of Egypt's past. The implications are profound. This discovery in Luxor does more than just add another artifact to a museum shelf. It actively supports a radical theory about ancient Egyptian builders. Scholars have long proposed that these civilizations often constructed sphinxes in intentional pairs, sometimes representing male and female counterparts to embody complete divine concepts. The unearthing of a second massive sphinx in a completely different city gives that idea terrifying new weight. It suggests a forgotten architectural pattern, a cultural blueprint that we are only just rediscovering. If this statue is real, then every assumption about where these guardians were placed and why shatters. And this is only the evidence we can see with our eyes on the surface. What LIDAR revealed, what finally changed everything, wasn't a legend or a rumor. It was a scan. South of the Great Sphinx, a research team ran a series of ground-penetrating surveys using LIDAR, a technology that fires millions of laser pulses from above and measures how they bounce back. In simple terms, LIDAR doesn't care about sand. It cuts through it. Up to 30 feet deep, the desert becomes transparent, like fog lifting from the ground, and that's when the screens lit up. In an area long believed to be empty, the data returned something that shouldn't exist. Straight lines, sharp angles, smooth curves, shapes too precise, too balanced, and too organized to be natural. Buried under tons of earth was a massive symmetrical structure, silent and undisturbed. The shock wasn't just that it was large, it was that the shape matched the Great Sphinx almost perfectly. The proportions were so close, it felt deliberate, as if the famous guardian had always had a counterpart. For thousands of years, we believed the Sphinx stood alone. The data suggested that belief was wrong. At first, researchers hesitated. The desert is notorious for illusions, wind-carved ridges, and deceptive shadows. So they scanned again and again. They widened the survey grid, checked every return, and analyzed every anomaly. Each pass made the image clearer. They could see what looked like a carved base cut directly into bedrock. Vertical breaks in the stone followed patterns consistent with ancient construction, not random geology. This wasn't a strange rock formation. It showed signs of being made. If the structure is real, it doesn't just add a new monument to Giza, it changes how the entire complex must be understood. But the biggest surprise came next. When researchers analyzed the alignment, they noticed the buried structure wasn't perfectly parallel to the known Sphinx. It was slightly tilted, by about 6 degrees to the east. To most people, that difference would mean nothing. To astroarchaeologists, it meant everything. Running the calculations back over 4,500 years, they found that a 6-degree offset would have pointed directly toward the rising of Sirius at dawn. In ancient Egypt, Sirius wasn't just a star, it was sacred, associated with Isis, the goddess of magic, rebirth, and resurrection. That opened a chilling possibility. What if the Sphinx we see today represents Ra, the sun god, and this buried twin was built for Isis? Ancient civilizations, from Greece to Mesopotamia, often built in pairs, creating balance between earth and sky, sun and stars, life and rebirth. Egypt's most famous monument may never have been meant to stand alone. It may have always been one half of a cosmic partnership, buried, erased, and forgotten by time. And now, with the scans complete, only one question remains. Do we dig the dangerous dig? The team focused on the spot where LIDAR readings were strongest, starting a careful excavation. The initial work was slow, hands moving through dense sand, packed hard by centuries of unending wind and forgotten floods. According to reports from researchers at the site, weathered limestone blocks bearing ancient tool marks were allegedly discovered in the area, though no official excavation report has been published by Egyptian authorities. The pattern was a perfect match for the toolwork seen on the walls surrounding the Great Sphinx itself. The Sphinx stands 240 feet long, 66 feet tall, and 62 feet wide. The sand was giving up pieces of a puzzle no one expected to solve. Then came the larger discovery. Some sources claim evidence of carved stone formations was detected, though the full extent remains unconfirmed. Its surface was worn smooth by an immense passage of time, but the form was undeniable. This was not a random rock. The curves were deliberate, a mirrored twin to the giant pores we already know. Questions that had haunted researchers for decades suddenly felt closer to answers. Why would a single guardian be enough for such an expansive necropolis? Perhaps the desert had been hiding a companion all along. Despite the thrill, the site presents serious challenges. The bedrock in this area is unstable, a fragile honeycomb of stone. Furthermore, the site sits dangerously close to one of the most heavily visited tourist zones on the planet. A full-scale excavation is not just difficult, it is potentially catastrophic. The risk of a sudden collapse or rapid erosion is too high. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities made the only call it could. All physical digging has been ordered to stop. Only non-invasive scans are permitted now. So the potential second Sphinx, if that is truly what lies below, remains imprisoned in its ancient sandy vault. Its full form and secrets still protected, yet the story is still being written by machines that can see through stone. Thermal imaging satellites have detected strange and persistent heat signatures emanating from that exact location. These signatures suggest hollow spaces, voids in the earth that could be chambers waiting in the dark. Even more compelling, ground-penetrating radar has now mapped what appear to be clear cavities beneath the surface. Their shape is not random. They look like tunnels, like deliberate corridors, and they seem to point directly toward the ancient Sphinx temple. The Sphinx that we know today, the Sphinx from the Great Pyramids of Giza, is the most famous of all sphinxes. Shadows of a second monument. As researchers studied the strange signals beneath the sand, something unsettling became clear. The readings weren't random. They lined up. The shapes repeated. Whatever was down there appeared far larger than a single buried fragment. To make sense of it, historians began digging through old records, accounts that had been dismissed and forgotten. One of the most intriguing came from 1817. That year, a British explorer named Henry Salt wrote about an unusual formation south of the Great Sphinx. He described a large mound that reminded him of the back of a lion rising from the desert. At the time, his observation was brushed aside as imagination. But then something unexpected surfaced. Hidden away in a London archive, researchers later uncovered a sketch linked to Salt's journal. The drawing showed a raised shape, positioned exactly where modern scans now detect the underground anomaly. That coincidence changed everything. Henry Salt wasn't a fringe traveler. He was the British Consul General in Egypt, a trained observer whose drawings are still preserved in major British collections. He had no reason to invent what he saw. He was simply documenting the landscape as it appeared in front of him. Modern imaging specialists took Salt's sketch and compared its proportions to the known measurements of the Great Sphinx. The result was unsettling. The two matched within about 3%. That level of accuracy was too close to ignore. It suggested something extraordinary. Salt may have glimpsed part of the monument before it disappeared again. Using digital erosion modeling, researchers studied how wind, water, and time would have reshaped exposed stone. The patterns matched the same cutting style seen on the visible Sphinx, raising a disturbing question. How could something this massive vanish almost completely? Geology provided part of the answer. During the Middle Kingdom, roughly 2,000 years before the Common Era, the Nile is believed to have surged toward the Giza Plateau during unusually severe floods. Thick layers of sediment would have spread across the land. Any structure standing nearby could have been partially buried as the waters receded. After that, the desert took over. Century after century, shifting sand dunes rose and fell, slowly sealing whatever lay beneath. If a second monument once stood guard at Giza, it may have vanished long before written history ever began. If uncovered today, its discovery would rank among the most significant archaeological events of the modern era. But instead of answers, the evidence has only opened the door to deeper, more unsettling questions, ones researchers are only just beginning to face: the knowledge of the ancients. The recent discoveries beneath the sands of Giza are forcing us to ask questions we thought were reserved for fantasy. With each new chamber detected inside the Great Pyramid, and every radar echo pointing to a second Sphinx, the old, comfortable explanations begin to crack. It leaves many wondering how the builders of ancient Egypt managed engineering work that still challenges modern experts. Some researchers argue that the precision found in these monuments points to knowledge that does not fit the time period: the smooth alignment of the Great Pyramid. The pyramids once housed the bodies of the pharaohs, but though ancient Egyptian civilization lasted for nearly 3,000 years, the exact proportions of the Sphinx and the placement of the surrounding temples suggest more than simple trial and error. Measurements taken by survey teams show a level of accuracy that would be impressive even today. The coordinated monumental work hints at a sophistication that goes far beyond simple copper tools and brute manpower. It points to a deep, possibly lost understanding of engineering, astronomy, and perhaps something else entirely. For many years, scholars from different parts of the world have debated whether ancient civilizations might have received guidance from advanced cultures that did not originate on Earth. This idea has been around long enough to attract both supporters and critics, and with every new finding, the discussion grows louder. The thought behind this theory is simple. If the builders had help from beings with superior knowledge, it could explain why so many monuments across several regions show complex mathematics, strange symbols, and architectural choices that appear far ahead of their time. Supporters of this idea often point out that ancient records contain descriptions of visitors who taught early cultures about engineering, astronomy, and the movement of the heavens. Although these writings are usually interpreted as myth, some researchers believe they may hold a trace of truth. According to them, these accounts might be attempts by early people to describe contact with advanced beings using the only language they had. If that is the case, the symbols left behind could be messages that we still have not fully understood. Mainstream archaeology continues to rely on traditional explanations, arguing that skill, time, and manpower are enough to account for the wonders of ancient Egypt. Yet the new findings inside the Great Pyramid and the rising possibility of another Sphinx have made that position more difficult to defend. Every new scan reveals details that create more questions. The idea that early builders could shape stone with such precision without advanced tools is becoming harder to accept for some investigators. With all these discoveries building on one another, the debate has reached a point where even seasoned researchers admit that the past might not be as simple as once believed. Each uncovered chamber and each unexpected anomaly makes the ground feel less stable. The search continues, and the deeper it goes, the more it seems that the world may have underestimated what ancient Egypt truly understood. The hyperspectral hunt. The next phase of this search won't use picks or shovels. It will use light. A powerful technology called hyperspectral imaging is now being brought into the investigation. Unlike traditional scans, it doesn't just look at the surface. It studies the chemical makeup of the ground itself. It can detect faint traces of ancient pigments, subtle changes in moisture, and hidden disturbances buried deep beneath the sand. In simple terms, it can reveal the ghost outlines of worked stone, even when that stone has been hidden for thousands of years. If those signals trace the shape of a monument carved before written history began, it could shatter long-held beliefs about Egypt's sacred landscape and force a complete rethink of the Giza necropolis. The picture isn't complete yet. LIDAR points to something massive underground. Historical accounts, like Henry Salt's 1817 sketch, hint that it was once visible. And Egyptian officials are now openly disagreeing about what was found. And when institutions argue this loudly, it usually means one thing: something real was detected. Above it all, the Great Sphinx still watches the sunrise, just as it has for millennia. The sand shifts, the desert hides its secrets. But now, we're watching back, with technology that sees through stone. And whether these scans uncover a second guardian, or something even stranger, one question remains impossible to ignore.